All right, so thank you for tuning in to another episode of That Sports Podcast. Today's overall theme is going to be about money. And the reason it's going to be about money is because one of the biggest things that's been turning me off to pro sports recently is the talk about how much money these people make and trying to justify why they need more money and stuff like that. Like, the MLB just went through another lockout, almost, prevented another lockout and stuff like that. People are holding out for bigger contracts and stuff like that. You hear UFC fight, like Francis Ngannou, I believe, is done with the UFC because he wants to make more money and the UFC doesn't want to pay him the money that he wants to make. He wants to make boxing money and stuff like that. So it's just like, it really bothers me to hear that all these people are, just so dissatisfied with the money that they're making, and they're supposedly doing something that they love waking up doing every day, right? It's like, I do it for the fans, I do it for the love of the game, blah, 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 blah. But then they'll turn around and be like, I'm not playing for a dime under X, Y, and Z amount. And it's like, if somebody even offered me $40,000 a year just to play certain video games, like, they were like, here, we want you to play this video game, write us a report on it, and, tell us if we should invest or tell us if we should, take it to market or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like, I would do that. For $40,000 a year, I would love doing it. And I understand that that's not a lot of money, but at the same time, it's like, I can do other things outside of that, to help make more money. Because I'd be doing something I love. If somebody told me they would pay me $35,000 a year just to write a few articles a week and stuff like that, I would do it because that's something I love. But then you hear all these pro athletes talk about, I do it for the fans and I do it for the love of the game, but yet, like I said, they won't sign a contract for under a certain amount of money and this, that, and the third and blah, 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 blah. And so, hearing about it nowadays really bothers me because part of the reasons I watch sports and I love them so much is because, it's entertainment. It's supposed to take you away from all of your troubles and help you forget about all the things that's bad in your life. You know what I mean? For whatever sport you're watching and however long it takes, the duration. Soccer games can be kind of long. Baseball games can be kind of long. Football games can be kind of long. But during that time, you're supposed to be, forget about all your worries and your troubles and your strife and all of that kind of shit and just, enjoy that moment. But you can't really do that because every single time, I'm like, for instance, football. You'll see a graphic, the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, why the fuck do I care that he's the highest paid quarterback in the NFL? That just reminds me that I'm so woefully underpaid to do a job that these people are saying is necessary to their business and their success and everything like that. But yet I can't command the same kind of money that NBA players command. I can't even command 10% of what they're commanding. Right? Like, I can't even get up to $100,000 a year just to do my job, and yet these guys are getting paid $50 million over the course of like 3-4 years to play a game. And it just makes me feel like it's like a slap in the face. It makes me feel bad about myself because what am I doing wrong to not be able to get that kind of money? You know what I mean? Like, what else do I have to do? Like, and then you think about it, and it's like you have to be dedicated to your normal day job on a level that's beyond anything you would have thought necessary, right? Like, we think, go into our 40-hour a week job. We go 40 hours a week to a job and that should be enough. We should be able to, but in order to make that extra money and to make those bonuses and you have to be staying there long hours and stuff like that, like working 60, 70-hour weeks and stuff like that, putting in that extra time, grinding, and this is all for a job that you may or may not like. Like, most every job I've had as an adult, I couldn't fucking stand. And that's just me being honest. So to hear these guys talk about, their money problems and why they deserve more money and how expensive their lives are and stuff like that, like, it just bothers me. And one of the things that I read this week was an article by Chris it was an article about Chris Pronger's tweet detailing how much NHL players actually make, right? And one of the first things he mentions is taxes and escrow. And I'm fine with taxes and escrow because that's money changing hands. You know what I mean? So an escrow account is basically an account where they hold where large sums of money are kept, and then they're dispersed to another party. So a third party holds on to that money, and they want to be compensated for that. So I understand that, right? I don't understand why they just don't do ACH bank transactions. I don't know. I don't know the mechanics behind all that. I don't understand. I don't know all the nuance behind all that. But 10% of, let's say, whatever that weekly check is and stuff, let's say that check is like $100,000. It's $10,000 out of that weekly check. So then that goes to that person's bank account. And like I said, then they got the taxes, and let's say it's up to 30% of the taxes. So now they're literally only seeing $60,000, but that's still $60,000 for an entire week. You multiply that times 4, that's $40,000. So that's $240,000 after taxes and escrow that these people are making just in that paycheck. Now, I'm not applying this to a pro athlete or what their actual salaries are. I'm just breaking down the numbers like he did. Right? So like I said, I'm just breaking down the numbers like he did. So this person would still comfortably be sitting on $240,000 a month. You multiply that by 10, that's $2.4 million. Well, is it 2.4? Yeah, I think it's like $2.4 million for the year. Now, I understand that there's other fees and stuff in there that come. So then he starts listing off a chiropractor, a masseuse, and a trainer. And I'm like, a chiropractor, a masseuse, and a trainer that you have to pay all the time. And it's like, to me, that sounds like a luxury. Why do you need a chiropractor and a masseuse? Like, what is the chiropractor doing that the masseuse can't do? And I understand that chiropractors are different lines of business and everything like that, but it's like, to me, it would seem like, why would you pay a chiropractor and a masseuse? I would find a chiropractor who doubles as a masseuse or can be a masseuse or would be willing to learn to be a masseuse and pay that person, right? Like, that means that that's one job that this person's doing, massaging you, making sure that your shit's not sore so you can go out and do your job the next day. But there are guys out there in top peak physical condition who don't have a masseuse. They don't have chiropractors. And yet they find a way to do that, to get up and do CrossFit and all of their training shit and stuff like that without a chiropractor, masseuse, and a trainer and everything like that. Like, essentially, to me, it just sounds like they're paying people to make sure they're 100% comfortable before going into their next job, before going into their next game or their next training session or whatever it is. It's like, when I hear trainer, when I see trainer, I'm like, so essentially what you're telling me is that you need somebody to babysit you and make sure that you go to the gym and work out. Because that's what a physical trainer is. It's basically somebody who takes you out to the gym or make sure that you're physically active. That's it. They are holding you accountable. So they are literally paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to people just to hold them accountable to work out so that way they can be in shape for their job. To me, that makes no sense. There are guys out there who don't have a personal trainer, who hit the gym, and like I said, are in peak top physical condition and stuff like that. Don't need a trainer, don't need nobody holding their hand, don't need nobody forcing them to do it and everything like that. So why are these people paying thousands of dollars? There are people out there who just pay for a gym membership and take the classes and stuff like that, and in top physical condition. And I understand that trainers know certain workouts and exercises and blah, 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 blah. But so do the people at Planet Fitness and all these other gyms, Gold's Gym and all this kind of stuff. My thinking on it is they hire these specific people for themselves because they want them to come to their house or their personal gym or whatever it is and work out with them in there and have some exclusivity with it. But it's like, to me, it's not a necessary expense. There are people out there getting massages once a month that aren't spending nearly the amount of money that these pro athletes are spending. But again, it's the exclusivity of it. They don't have to go out to some shop. They can pay somebody to come to their crib. There are still masseuses that are cheaper. Then he went on the list of vehicle, and he was like $75,000. I was like, really? I was like, there are people out there right now who make enough money to own a $75,000 car, but chose not to get a $75,000 car. Why? Because they didn't want to spend the $75,000. They knew that there was a more economical way to get a car and have a mode of transportation. And then another thing that kind of baffled me is it's like, if they're not taking the car with them and just selling it when they move and buying a new car when they get there, it's like, why would you buy a $75,000 car in the first place? Why not buy a $10,000 car? A $15,000 car, a $20,000 used car? There are plenty of decent used cars out there that don't cost $75,000. Now, if they're keeping the brand new car for the life of it and everything like that, but the way he made it sound is like whenever they move to a new city, they get a new car. It's like, why would you just buy a whole brand new car when you don't need it the whole time? My parents we moved around a lot because my dad was in the military. We would go to what are called lemon lots, where people are selling their used cars and stuff like that. They leave a little note on a little flyer in the car with the price, the phone number to contact them and stuff like that. And you go there, you call them up and you say, hey, I'm interested in buying your car. They say, all right, let's arrange a meet. You come down, you test drive the car, you take it to a mechanic, do what you got to do and stuff like that. If you like it, you buy it. There are cheaper ways than spending $75,000 on a vehicle. But the reason they do it is because they quote unquote have the money. And then they're paying nutrition. They listed nutritionist and food. And I'm like, another babysitter. Somebody else to tell them, literally tell them how to eat, what foods not to eat, what foods to avoid. Do you really need to pay somebody to tell you that you need to eat more salads and that you need to that in order to maintain a certain body physique and everything like that, you need to eat certain amount of calories and everything like if you're a very tall, muscular person and stuff like that, like bodybuilders, they have to consume ridiculous amount of calories per day in order to fuel the massive amounts of muscle that they pack on. Right? So if you're an athlete, you need to consume the amount of calories that your body needs to maintain its weight, build muscle, whatever to have the energy levels and to keep your energy levels up and stuff, right? So they need somebody to tell them, oh, don't eat too much fast food and reduce your protein intake during the season and stuff like that. It's like, this is all stuff that's readily available on the internet. You could consult with a nutritionist one time, get all the information that you want and could possibly need from that nutritionist at one time, pay him that one-time fee, that one-time consultation fee, and be done. There are people out there who've tried different diets. There are people out there who created their own diets and stuff like that, all because they went out and experimented and did shit. And you're telling me that they're spending all this money on a nutritionist and stuff and on food, and to me it just doesn't make any sense. It's just luxury spending for the sake of luxury spending. And I understand that some people will try to find some justification and stuff like that. But to me, like I said, there are people out there who are in peak physical condition simply because they put their best foot forward in doing that. In my opinion, it's like if you're a pro athlete, in my opinion, it is your responsible to be in peak physical condition. It's not anybody else's responsibility to get you in that peak physical condition. Yeah, the coaches are on staff, they have weight trainers and all of that stuff, and then all during the off season and everything like that. But if you need somebody to hold you accountable and make sure you're doing this and doing that and everything like that, I get that. But why are you paying these people hundreds of thousands of dollars to do it? Anyway, like I said, and I didn't really know how to feel about the article because at the end, the NHL player was still taking home like $2 million or something like that. And like I said, it's just, I don't understand what I was supposed to feel. Was I supposed to feel sorry for them? Was I supposed to feel bad for them and stuff like that? Like at the end of the day, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, like, most of the stuff that these people pay for, it's all self-inflicted. It's all self-inflicted. All the money that they spend, it's like, why do they need an agent? Because they can't sit down in a room and be like, I want X, Y, and Z dollar amount. I want this. I want that. Right? Like they can't sit there and talk to the owners and be like, this is how much money I need. This is what I want. This is that and the third and stuff like that. They need somebody to come in there and talk for them and this, that, and the third. I get having a lawyer to review the final contract and examine all the loopholes and explain all that kind of stuff. But to have a full-time agent representing you and everything like that, like to me, it just doesn't make any sense. Like I get it when you're first trying to find a team and trying to get into the league. But after that, it's like I'm cutting that person loose. I'm making my own connections. I'm doing this on my own. I'm not going to pay somebody 10% of my salary just so they can make some phone calls on my behalf. It's a glorified personal assistant. Anyway, the next thing I saw that kind of, set me on fire was this article that basically said that Brittany Griner's detention highlights pay disparity between men and women in sports. And this bothered me simply because people don't put perspective on this type of stuff. Brittany Griner was set to make $220,000 for this upcoming basketball season, I believe. That's a lot of money to play a game. Even if she had to pay, like, let's say, $80,000 in taxes and fees and escrow and stuff like that, right? She's still taking home $140,000. You break that down monthly, that's roughly about $12,000, or in between like $10,000 and $12,000, maybe even $13,000 a month. To me, that's a lot of money to get paid to be playing a game. Sports do not do anything to benefit society. All the people who helped Brittany Griner get to where she's at are woefully underpaid compared to what she's paid to go out there and just play a fucking game. There are soldiers out there risking their lives, cops, there are nurses, teachers, people who work, in professions where they don't see these large amounts of money and these pay raises and stuff like that every day help people like Brittany Griner get through everyday life and get to the point that they're at, just for them to turn around and be like, oh, I'm not making enough money, I need to make more. And I get it. I understand. It seems like it's not fair when you compare their salaries to men in the NBA. But when you compare the WNBA to the NBA, you have to look at one thing. How much money both industries generate. How much money they both generate. The NBA generates $8 billion of revenue per year. The WNBA doesn't even come close to that. 3 players on the Lakers roster alone would blow, I would say, more than half of what the WNBA makes in a year. Now, the reason that the NBA makes so much money is because it's been around for 75 years. Men have been building this up for 75 years. People have been building this up for 75 years. The WNBA has only been around for 25 years. This is an established product. And the WNBA is, I don't want to say like not an established product, but it's a relatively new product. It's only been around a third of the time that the NBA's been around. And I'm not saying that women shouldn't be compensated fairly in any regard, because I believe that all pro athletes are more than fairly compensated for playing a sport, fighting, and doing whatever it is that they're doing. It's like, because as compared to a normal day job, it could really suck. I understand that sometimes UFC fighters have to take on part-time jobs or do other things to make money. I understand that some Brittany Griner and some of these other female pro athletes have to go other places and play and this, that, and the third. But how's that any different than the everyday average person? It's not. There are people out there working 3 jobs and they're still living foot to mouth. There are people out there working 80 hours a week and more, just so they can make ends meet per month. Brittany Griner only has to show up to practice and to the games. She got to show up to the community service events and all that kind of stuff and the promotional events and everything like that. But that's it. That is her obligation. During the off season, she gets time to do whatever the fuck she wants. This is a life that she chose. This is something that she loves doing. This is something she's supposedly doing for the love of the game and for the fans and blah, 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 blah. It's not supposed to be about money. And it's like, where's the WNBA supposed to get this extra revenue? If I'm mad at anybody as a WNBA player, I'm upset with the WNBA for not securing more sponsorship deals, for not finding ways to create more revenue to pay us. Right? Like, I'm mad at the people in charge, not the people next door, because the people next door have nothing to do with how much money the WNBA makes. Aside from the fact that most people watch men's basketball more and that's everybody. That's men and women. I can't tell you how many women I've heard that say that they would, like, when I talk about pro sports with women and they talk and I ask them, what's your favorite sports teams? More often than not, they're talking about their favorite sports teams in men's leagues. Oh, my favorite football team is the Denver Broncos. My favorite basketball team is the Lakers. My favorite baseball team this, and stuff like that. Very seldom do I ever hear women talk about women's sports. And let's be honest, and I'll go so far as to even say that most of the women that I've come into contact with don't give a shit about sports outside of the Super Bowl and the NBA finals and stuff like that, or if they're out on a date with their man, or they're out at a game with their man, or whatever it is and stuff like that. Like, most women do not care about sports at all, like on any level. So now you're talking about women's basketball competing against men's professional basketball and men's college basketball. That's two different leagues that they're competing against for viewership. So if I'm mad at anybody, I'm mad at the people who are supposed to be securing us sponsorship deals and bringing in more revenue and finding more people, finding more money and stuff like that to support this league and make this league bigger and everything like that. I'm not mad at the men. I'm not sitting there complaining that men are making more money and stuff like that. I'm mad at the people who are in charge because we've been at this for 25 years and we're still only making $60 million in revenue every year. How can we increase that revenue? How can we get more money? But then on the flip side of that, where does all that extra money come from? Us, the fans. If you look at men's pro sports salaries in relationship to ticket prices and jersey prices and concession prices and everything like that, you'll see that they go up. And why is that? It's not because beer's more expensive. It's not because this, that, and the third. It's because at the end of the fucking day, these owners have to find a way to make sure that they have the money to pay these pro athletes. Right? Because you have a pro athlete, because these pro teams are signing guys on $50-60 million contracts over 7 years, 5 years, 4 years, whatever it is and stuff like that. They're signing guys to 2-year deals for $10 million. $10 million out of the WNBA's revenue would leave $50 million for the rest of the players. There are a lot of WNBA players in the league aside from Brittany Griner. And a lot of them aren't even making Brittany Griner money because she's a bigger star. She's the bigger talent. She's the bigger draw. That's the name of the game. Now, at the end of the day, like I can't sit here and try and dismiss the fact that, like I said, it does seem like it's unfair, but you have to put it in perspective. Sports are a business, and their goal is to make money. And at the end of the day, the NBA is making $8 billion a year, whereas the WNBA is only making $60. So where are they supposed to get that extra money from? And I understand being that if I was working for the WNBA and trying to figure out where we can make more money and stuff like that, I'd be worried too, because we're only a $60 million a year. We only generate $60 million a year as compared to other sports leagues and stuff like that who are probably generating more revenue. We don't have as much flexibility to argue and negotiate these deals and stuff like that. When they go to these networks and say, oh, we want X, Y, and Z amount to be, for you guys to put our games on and stuff like that, they don't have a lot of leverage there because it's only $60 million in revenue that they're generating. I guarantee you if they were generating, like, let's say $500 million a year, more people would be willing to invest, but they're not. People want to invest in the NBA. Companies want to invest in the NBA and be part of the NBA, the NFL, and the NHL because in professional baseball and professional soccer because they command more eyes. They draw more attention. And it has nothing to do with men versus women in sports, because if we talk about men versus women in sports, women can play sports. There's no denying that fact. But they are definitely not playing sports on par as the same as men. The top scorers in the WNBA don't even get up to 30 points a game. I looked it up. I think the top scorer in the WNBA gets like 20, averages like maybe 25 points a game or something like that. Whereas you have guys who are averaging 30 points a game. Like I think the top 5 in the top 10, there's at least, I want to say, half of them easily score more than 27 points a game. And these women who are scoring 25 points a game, they're playing against other women. In the NBA, Chris Paul is like 6'2", 6'3", and he would be considered short in the NBA. Whereas in the WNBA, somebody who's considered 6'3", 6'4", and stuff like that, they're relatively tall. I believe the average height of a WNBA player is like 5'11" or something like that, between 5'11" and 6 foot or something. Brittany Griner is the tallest, and I think she's like 6'7", 6'9". Whereas you have guys in the NBA who are almost 7 foot. They regularly get 7 foot guys in the NBA. And I'm not saying that these women can't compete in the NBA or can't compete with men. I'm just saying that they're not playing basketball on the same level as men simply because men just hold the edge when it comes to sports. And I went through this on a previous episode. You can check the stats. In every measurable statistic in pro sports, men hold the edge. You can sit here and argue with me back and forth. Men and women are equal, and men aren't this, men aren't that, women aren't this, women aren't that. You can argue, but the stats don't lie. The numbers don't lie. There was a kid in middle school, a middle school boy, who ran a 400 meter dash or whatever it is, the 400 meter sprint, whatever it is, and stuff like that, the 400 meter race. He ran that shit in 48 seconds. That is on par with the fastest time in women's history. In the Olympics. That is on par with that time, with the record. That is a middle school boy running at the speed of grown women. And I'm not trying to say that women aren't fast and can't, like, a woman can't outrun me. I'm not saying that at all. I'm an average dude. I don't train. I don't get out there and sprint every day. I'm 33 going on 34. I'm out of shape. Like, I'm not saying that they could sprint against me. But if you took the fastest male sprinter and put him up against the fastest woman sprinter, the fastest man sprinter is going to win every single time. It's just a statistical fact. No one wants to watch the JV team play. And that's not being disrespectful to women. I'm just saying in general, like I said before, women mostly watch men's sports. I'm dead serious. I've come across more women who watch men's sports or don't watch sports at all than I've heard anyone talk about women's sports. I love women's soccer in the U.S. versus men's soccer in the U.S. Why? Because the women play better. The women are actually winning games, whereas the men's teams, Even men's pro soccer isn't even that impressive to me, because I know that if you took one of these pro soccer teams and stuck them over there in Europe, they would not perform as well. The top teams in our men's soccer league wouldn't be able to hold a candle to some of those professional teams in the Spanish leagues and the French leagues and stuff like that. Like, they got some squads out there. And that's because their development system is way better than ours. It's light years ahead of ours. But that doesn't mean that, like I said, I would rather watch women's soccer in this country than men's soccer, just because I'm more fascinated with women's soccer because they play better. They just have a better vibe, they have a better play and stuff like that. They're winning games, and I like seeing that kind of shit. I don't like watching men play soccer. And that's American soccer. European soccer, I'll watch that all day because they're good over there. And like I said, I'm not trying to be sexist and anything like that. I'm just saying when we talk about specifics and why the WNBA women aren't being paid as much, it's simply because the WNBA doesn't generate enough revenue. If the WNBA starts generating more revenue, then they can start paying more. But that has nothing to do with the NBA. The NBA is not keeping the WNBA from making their money and doing their thing and stuff like that. They're doing what they've been doing for years. They've been at this business for years. They've monopolized the basketball market. And I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, the men should forfeit some of their money to pay for women to play basketball and be paid the same, because I think all pro athletes are overcompensated for what they do. Until we get to a point in our society where the average Joe is making a livable wage, you won't hear me going out going, oh yeah, pro athletes are underpaid. If I get a job that pay a regular ass job that pays me, let's say $200,000 a year, then I'd say Brittany Griner is underpaid. But until that time comes, I don't think she was underpaid. I don't think there was any need for her to go over to Russia. She had plenty of opportunities over here. A lot of these pro athletes, one of the things that people take for granted is the fact that pro athletes get exposure. Every time they put on a play, every time they go out there and they perform, they put on the sport and everything like that, they go out there and they compete and stuff like that, they have eyes on them that the everyday average person doesn't have. Just by them signing a contract and being a pro athlete, they have something that people will never have. The attention of their fans, the public, people who follow the sports and stuff like that, they have all of that. And they can easily parlay that into other things. If I was the kicker for the New York Giants right now, you know what I'd be doing on the side on my time off, my days off? I'd be Twitch streaming, playing video games. Talking about my time playing football and everything like that. Having my own podcast. There are tons of things that you can do to help make extra money and stuff like that. That way you can set yourself up for a career outside of those sports. All right, moving on. Oscar De La Hoya says Jake Paul could fight a champion, beat a champion, and it would be good for boxing. Well, my only gripe with this is that Oscar De La Hoya is only saying this shit because he's trying to hype Jake Paul up to get on that money train, right? Like, that's the only reason he even has, he even wants to do, is because like I said, sports are a business, right? And Oscar De La Hoya says Jake Paul's good for boxing and blah, 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 blah. The only reason he's saying that is because it's generating jet revenue. It's generating money. It's generating a buzz, right? But the truth of the matter is Jake Paul and Logan Paul and all of this celebrity boxing bullshit and stuff like that, it's all just diluting professional boxing. It's diluting the art of boxing, right? I would respect Jake Paul and Logan Paul had they went and fought in the amateurs and stuff like that, had some amateur fights and stuff, and actually fought guys who spend their lives training and everything like that. But instead, they were some sort of celebrity before, then they transitioned into boxing by fighting other guys who were YouTubers and stuff like that. Then they stepped up and fought some washed up pro athletes who aren't fighting anymore. It's like they keep calling them professional fighters and stuff like that, but Floyd Mayweather's record was not going to be affected by Logan Paul's boxing match. Right? Like, if Floyd Mayweather lost that match, it wasn't going to be an official match. It was an exhibition. So how does it count for Jake Paul's record but not for Floyd Mayweather's record? Right? Like, nobody's considering that. Oh, he's 5-0. They're 4-0. They're 5. It's because they handpicked guys that they knew that they could outbox. It's not rocket science. It's not hard to figure out what they're doing and stuff like that. They're fighting guys who are smaller, not in their weight class and everything like that. Floyd Mayweather was significantly smaller than Logan Paul when they fought. But Jake Paul still couldn't put the leather on Floyd Mayweather, and Floyd Mayweather landed way more punches. I think Jake Paul didn't even land 20% of his punches, whereas Floyd Mayweather landed almost 40% of his punches in their fight. And Jake Paul talks about, he survived that fight. Floyd Mayweather carried his ass. If Floyd Mayweather wanted to put Jake Paul and Logan Paul out of that fight, he would have put Logan Paul out of that fight. But it was an exhibition match. And I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. Until these guys actually fight people who are actual boxers, who actually are a threat, I'm never going to believe the hype. Never, not never. Right? Like, who is Logan Paul fought? He fought KSI twice. That's some YouTuber, not a professional boxer. Some YouTuber who trained. They had some beef, then they trained, and then they boxed. Twice. And the only reason it's considered a professional fight is because they were paid for it. There was a large sum of money exchanged. It was big publicity. There was a headliner. It was a headliner. That's why it was considered a pro fight. There are guys out there who've been training their entire lives to get to where Jake Paul, Logan Paul, all these professional fighters are on the big stage and stuff like that, and still haven't gotten their break yet. Still haven't gotten discovered. But yeah, you're going to sit here and tell me that Jake Paul and Logan Paul are good for the sport? They're not. All they've proven is that all you need is a fan base to be successful in the boxing business. Not to be successful in boxing, but to be successful at the business part of boxing. All you have to have is a big name and have somebody with another big name to fight you. Jake Paul saw that, his first fight with Tyron Woodley was a success, but his second one, not so much. Even though he knocked him out, it still didn't make as much money as it was supposed to. And that's because no one gave a shit. Then you got Logan Paul over here saying he'd fight Khamzat Chimaev, but the only way he'd do it is in a boxing ring. Of course. Of course he would. Because boxing is not mixed martial arts. As much as I love boxing, boxing is not mixed martial arts. And the reason I love mixed martial arts is because it's the closest we'll ever get to seeing a sanctioned, pure, all-out brawl between two men. In boxing, you can't kick, you can't punch. You can't kick, you can't elbow, you can't take somebody down, you can't grapple them, you can't submit them. There are a lot of ways to lose a fight in mixed martial arts, but there aren't a lot of ways to lose a fight in boxing. You can get outscored or you can get knocked out. Right? Those are the only two ways that you can lose a boxing match. Obviously, there's disqualifications and shit like that, but in mixed martial arts, you can be winning a fight by standing up and fighting somebody, but you can still get taken down and submitted in that same fight. You could be winning that first round just because you were knocking that guy around the ring. But then all of a sudden he comes back, he takes you down, and he pounds you to the ground. That's and puts you in a submission hold, or the ref comes over and stops it because you're not intelligently defending yourself enough to where they feel like you're still fighting and everything. You still have a chance. Like I said, there are a lot of different ways to lose in the mixed martial arts fight, and that's what Logan Paul doesn't want. He wants to be able to stand up and box. That way he can't get taken to the ground and beat the shit out of, can't have his arm broken, can't get submitted and shit like that. He doesn't want a real fight. He wants to box. And while I respect his grit to get into the ring, I don't respect the way he's going about it. Because you can't sit there and call out an MMA fighter and be like, oh, I'd fight you, but I'd only box you. MMA isn't boxing. There's a difference between striking and boxing, right? In boxing, you have to pace yourself because you're not always going to get that one-punch knockout. You're not just going to come out and lay somebody out with in that first punch. You might take them down, and you might end up taking somebody down in the first round because of a flurry of punches, or you caught them real good with one punch, and then you caught them with a combination and stuff. But there's not a lot of boxing matches that end within the first round. In the UFC, you don't necessarily. I'm not saying they don't necessarily teach people to pace themselves, but they're throwing a lot more into those punches because the gloves are lighter, and they can whip those punches around faster. And when they connect, they're actually knocking folks out. It's like if you look at somebody like who's Francis Ngannou, Cyril Gane, who's the big guy? I can't think. Derek Lewis. These guys are knockout artists. But would that translate into boxing? Maybe not. Yeah, they'll still hit hard. Their punching power is still going to be there, but you're talking about going from an 8-ounce glove, a 6 to 8 ounce glove, to a full 12-ounce glove. And it's also structured different. The boxing glove comes all the way around the hand, and there's more padding up here. Whereas in MMA, the only thing that's padded is this area here. You can still grab and move your fingers and stuff like that. And like I said, but in boxing, like I said, the gloves are a little bit heavier, and they're designed to not necessarily make the punches less effective, but they're designed to disperse that weight, so it's not one central, it's designed for more surface area, so it's not such a punishing blow as with MMA gloves. These guys are just doing this shit for clout. They're not trying to change the sport, revolutionize the sport, or anything like that. They're doing it for clout. They're throwing all these names out there. I think Logan Paul even said that he would want to fight Paddy Pimblett, and I believe Paddy Pimblett's a welterweight or something like that. I'd have to look up his stats and everything like that. And I'm not saying Paddy can't fight and couldn't put a hurting on Jake Paul, but we're talking about, like I said, going from mixed martial arts to boxing. It's a different sport altogether. Learning to the years it takes to master just being able to outbox somebody. Because in MMA, it's a whole different ballgame, which is why Jake Paul wants none of or why Logan Paul doesn't want any parts of Kazmat Chimaev in the mixed martial arts arena, because he knows he would get dismantled. Same with Jake Paul. Neither one of the Paul brothers really wants to get into the octagon. Because the truth of the matter is that any one of these pro fighters in the mixed martial arts world, we'll just tear them apart. Because as far as I'm concerned, they have this fantastical idea that because they were able to beat some washed up guys and some nobodies, that they're able to come into the UFC and compete with some of these top tier athletes. And that's not the case at all. There's a lot of top tier. Ben Askren didn't make it in the UFC very long. Why? Because he was a one-dimensional guy. He wasn't known as a striker. The guy could wrestle. He's a world-class wrestler. And I don't want to take anything away from the accomplishments of any of the legendary fighters, these guys that they fought, like Tyron Woodley and Ben Askren and Floyd Mayweather. I mean, these guys had impressive fight careers, but Floyd Mayweather's way past his prime, right? And I'm not saying that he still can't fight. He's probably still ain't got it. But let's be honest. He's not putting himself in positions to tarnish his boxing legacy, right? He's just not doing that. It's the same thing Jake Paul and Logan Paul are doing. All they're doing is hand-picking guys that they know that they can beat up on, hand-picking guys that they know that they can outbox, and then they're winning fights. To me, it's terrible for pro sports, because there are people out there who are actually more talented than they are, who deserve the opportunity to be in the limelight, and all these guys are doing is taking it away. They're diluting the purity of the sport. It's all just for money. You know, staying with that overall money theme, it's all just for money. And to me, it's just it's perverse. You know what I mean? I love mixed martial arts and boxing because they're pure sports. They're just two people going out there, going against each other head to head in combat, and may the better person win. Men or women. I love watching women box as much as I like watching men box. Obviously, I like watching men box, and I like watching men fight a little bit more because there's there's more knockouts, right? But I'll watch a woman fight just as quickly as I'll watch a man fight, because the chance of a knockout, chance of a knockout in a woman's fight is there. But if you put two fights on, right, and I was like, all right, which fight would I want to watch? Two nobody guys fight, or Mackenzie Dern versus Aspen Ladd or something like that. I would rather watch Mackenzie Dern versus Aspen Ladd, because these girls know what they're doing, and there's probably going to be a submission or some sort of knockout. There might be a knockout, you know what I mean? A TKO stoppage, something. Whereas these two nobodies, they may not perform well. Right? Like, that's the risk that you run when you fight with nobodies, because sometimes they get up on the big stage and they're too timid both of them are too timid to go out there and take a risk and, do anything dangerous. It goes to a decision. Sometimes these big name fights go to a decision. And I can't stand that shit. It's like somebody should have pulled the trigger. Somebody should have pushed the action. Somebody should have done more to win that fight. I hate when fights go to a decision. I really do. Anyway, thanks for watching this episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Peace.